call the Land Use Plan Steering Committee Public Use Land Use Plan Engagement Session to order. And our first speaker will be Wes McLeod, the Senior Regional Planner of Cape Fear Council of Governments.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Board. I'm going to do a short overview of some information contained in the land use plan for you, and then we'll turn this meeting over to public comment. If folks from the general public do have comments, please hold those comments until after I'm done with my presentation, and you can come up and speak into the mic. Is that correct, how you would like? Okay. All right. With no further ado, I will start our short presentation here. I'm going to talk briefly about what a land use plan is, why the town embarked upon doing a land use plan, some brief community profile statistics, an overview of the community survey, and public input results, and then any questions that this particular board has. If the general public has questions, please ask them during your public comment session. And once all public comments have been received, myself or the board will answer any questions that you may have. First, what is a land use plan? So this is the official document that contains goals, policies, analysis, maps, discussion of existing conditions that provides a blueprint for growth for the town of Holden Beach. It offers formal guidance in the form of adopted goals and policies once this plan is adopted to help staff and elected officials make decisions with regard to land use matters. And then it also, third, offers an open forum for the public, for example, like this, to provide input as to what's important for you all, for the town of Holden Beach moving forward. This land use plan is not a zoning ordinance. It does not dictate what can or can't happen on the ground. There is one instance in which there is some regulatory aspect to this land use plan. That is if a CAMA major permit application occurs within the town's jurisdiction. And that CAMA major permit is in an area of environmental concern. Now, this is a major project. This is not someone building a house or a small residential development. It would be a substantial project. This plan will then be reviewed against that major permit and to see if those two things are consistent. If the proposed major permit project is consistent with the plan, then the project may proceed. And so that's really the only case in which this document is a regulatory component. It is primarily a guidance document. It offers guidance to staff. It offers guidance to elected officials for budgeting purposes. There are zero mandates in here for funding or zero mandates in here for any implementation. There's a number of recommendations in this plan. The town can choose to proceed with them or not. They're just that, recommendations, no requirements. All right, so briefly, we're going to talk about some basic demographic statistics. Permanent population growth is the data that's captured by the Census Bureau and also the Office of State Budget and Management. From 1980 to 2016, your population, permanent resident population, increased from 241 to 633. Although I will say since the 90s, your population has more or less stayed the same. Little increases here or there. Now, that doesn't mean that your seasonal population hasn't increased or you haven't seen an influx of new homes, and we'll talk about that as well. At the same time, Brunswick County has experienced substantial permanent resident population growth. During that same time, their population increased by 83,000 individuals. In fact, in 1980, there was just under 36,000 people in Brunswick County, which is a little bit hard to believe. And so there's been an astounding increase in population in your county. Among all of the North Carolina beach towns, They vary in terms of the extent to which their permanent population has increased. There's been a number of towns that have pursued annexation. They've annexed property on the mainland. As a result, they've had a natural increase in population, or an increase in population that perhaps is not similar to yours. Some of the communities that haven't pursued annexation have had similar population growth numbers, more or less stayed stable or had very little permanent population increase. You know, you can look at the difference, for example, in Sunset Beach, who's had a lot of mainland annexation, their population has increased dramatically, for example. But on average, we have had a fair amount of growth in our beach towns, again, primarily due to annexation off of the historical island proper portions of their jurisdiction. In terms of the permanent population by age, these are your permanent residents again. Vast majority of your permanent residents are of the baby boomer age 55 to 74. That's consistent with most of our beach communities in North Carolina, as the communities being a retirement destination for folks. This comparison shows Brunswick County. Brunswick County overall has a much higher median age than the state, at just under 51 years of age. North Carolina, for example, is at a little over 38 years of age. So Brunswick County is an inherent retirement destination, has a lot higher portion of individuals that are of a retirement age. Of course, in Holden, where you substantially lack in the balance, if you will, of population by age, are your millennial group, which is age 20 to 34. It's not a lot of jobs here. You don't have college here, so there's not a lot of incentive for young folks to live here. We are starting to see a little bit of an increase in trend of having some younger folks live in these beach jurisdictions. The fact that folks can work remotely, the fact that folks desire some of the quality of life principles that the beach towns offer has encouraged some younger folks to move into these beach towns that historically has not been the case. But you guys still have a very small percentage of your population of that age 20 to 34. Now, what you really feel is in the summer months, that seasonal population. You don't feel like you got 600 people living here. You feel like you probably got closer to 20,000 folks here in town. And this is true of most of our beach towns. You know, the permanent population really doesn't paint the true picture of what's going on. And even in some of the off months, we're having longer and longer shoulder seasons and folks staying longer and longer and visiting in some of the off months that typically, historically, they hadn't. But we would estimate, in terms of your seasonal overnight population, these are folks that are visiting your vacation homes, vacationing overnight, somewhere around 17,000 folks. That's a substantial increase, almost a 30-fold increase. Then you add in some of the day trip visitors. That number's probably ticking up close to 20,000 folks on a peak day. That's your July 4th type day, Memorial Day holiday. And so there are similar exponential factor increases in other Brunswick County beach towns as well. In terms of population projections, permanent population projections, if the town, and this is the methodology that the Division of Coastal Management recommends that we use, if the town coincides with some of the population growth rate at which the county is growing, you'd have a little over 1,000 permanent residents in the next 30 years. You know, depending on what happens in the next decade or so, I think is gonna be telling for whether folks are continuing to try to move to these beach towns or not, whether folks are continuing to work remotely and live sort of where they want to live versus living somewhere purely for work purposes. It'll be interesting to see how that trend unfolds over the next decade or so. In terms of owner-occupied housing value, You guys are slightly above the North Carolina beach municipal average. On average, the beach communities, the median housing value is 384,000. You guys are just above 400,000. North Carolina overall, for some perspective, is 157. Excuse me, 157,000. So you still have a much higher home value than North Carolina overall across the state. But you're sort of just right there in the middle, similar to a fair number of other beach communities in the state. Building activity, we've seen an uptick, not just in your jurisdiction, but all of the Brunswick County jurisdictions in the issuance of new construction permits for single-family housing. So despite the fact that your permanent population is more or less stabilized, you still had an uptick. You're seeing more homes built, et cetera, but those homes are going in to be seasonal homes or second homes for vacationers. So you've seen a steady increase from 2007 up to 2017. I'm not sure, Tim, if we're somewhere around these similar numbers.
We're still running at that number.
In
Still
the
running.
60s?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. So, 5 new construction permits a month or so, something to that effect. I'm going to talk a little bit about public input, and then I'll close a portion of my presentation. We had a fairly robust public input portion of this plan. We had a community survey that received just under 900 responses. 91% of those respondents were actually property owners, whether they be permanent residents or second homeowners. We also had a public meeting in which, and this was held in February, if I recall, and we had 35 folks attend. We had a great turnout for that meeting. And so we have analyzed the results of the data. All of that information is contained in the draft plan, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the results of that public input. But one of the questions that we asked about on the community survey is what's your favorite thing about Holden Beach? Folks responded that they enjoyed the lack of commercial development, that it was primarily a residential community, that it was uncrowded, offered family-friendly atmosphere. They liked the natural resources, the quiet, the all-season solitude. Obviously, that response is coming from a lot of permanent residents offering that response. And then again, mostly single-family houses was identified as well. So we took the results of the survey, discussion with our land use plan steering committee, the results of our meeting, and developed the top 5 public input priorities. And these are the things we feel like are the most important to the public at large. Again, this doesn't mean that the town needs to allocate funding or budgeting or anything like that. These are just the things we feel like the results of the public input show are most important to folks overall. One being ensuring the future resilience of the town through coastal storm damage reduction and beach protection efforts. We had a lot of responses about, make sure we continue to pursue beach renourishment, make sure we continue to have enough sand on our beach to provide an opportunity for our tourists and residents to actually utilize that resource. 2, encourage a low-density single-family residential pattern to preserve local character. Essentially, maintain your existing land use pattern that you have. Single-family, low-density residential. 3, support roadway maintenance and stormwater mitigation to reduce localized flooding on town roadways. Obviously, we've had in the past couple years some fairly serious storm events. Stormwater drainage and roadway drainage are a particular concern, not just in your jurisdiction, but all of the Brunswick County beaches. So this came of no surprise to us, and the town is actively and continually working on trying to improve stormwater, etc. 4, maintain environmental quality and clean water to preserve the coastal natural resources that contribute to the town's quality of life. Obviously, there's certain things that exist here. There's a reason why we come here. We want to make sure that those are preserved moving forward. And then lastly, We had quite a few comments and discussion about trying to enhance bicycle and pedestrian facilities to provide safe options for non-motorized transportation. Folks come here as a tourist destination. They like to be able to walk and bike to places, and they feel like they want to support the town in providing more safe options or enhanced options for bicycle and pedestrian travel. All right. That's it from me. If the board has any questions for me, I'm open to those, but if not, then we'll turn it over to the public for them folks to provide comments.
Are there any questions from the board?
Well, sir,
Yes, sir.
I do have one question, and it's more of just a validation.
Sure.
And make sure I heard you correctly. Everything in here, the town's not required to do.
That's right. That's right.
It's just for a recommendation, a consideration.
That's absolutely right. Yes. There's certain things that are required to be in that plan to meet the state guidelines for planning. For example, there's a matrix at the end that we say that this department's responsible for that, that it'll get done in this fiscal year. We have to say that. I don't have any idea if the town will ever pursue some of these items, but we gotta identify, we have to put a fiscal year in there, for example. And those recommended actions, and I believe they are actually defined in each chapter, say, you know, they are just that. They are recommendations. Town doesn't have to do anything in there. Now, there's some policies that should sort of be the position of the town on an item, one way or another, and as you guys know, we've discussed those at length, but still, those don't mean that you need to do anything. They're just, in general, the town's position on a particular matter.
How about the goals? Same thing?
Goals are goals. That's, you know, these are the things that we would like to try to achieve. If we don't achieve them, fine. If tomorrow we feel like that's no longer a goal that's important to us, that's fine too. You know, there's 5 goals that the Division of Coastal Management makes us put in there. And those are those topics that are mentioned at the onset of each of those policy sections of those chapters. And we, you know, clearly stated that they need to be in there for your plan to be formally approved by Coastal Resources Commission.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Dwight or Ann? Okay, you wanna stay there, or so that people can ask questions, or?
Well,
Wait,
I prefer if, so we don't get into a bunch of back and forth, I will, you know, and you guys write down the questions as well. Folks have questions, come up, comment, and then we will answer your questions all at the same time, rather than sort of having a bunch of dialogue back and forth. And if we need to follow up and make sure we clarify things, we will, but in the interest of everyone's time, folks have comments, come up and provide your comments all at once, and then we'll proceed with answering any questions that you may have.
Yeah, we ask that you recognize yourself by your name so that we can get you on the record. And then, if you have a comment, make a comment or a question at that time. But we really like to have your name so we can get it as a matter of record.
Do you need their address or not?
No, we just need their name.
Okay, at that point, we'll turn it open to the floor. Are there any questions? Comments? Pat, would you like to?
Pat Kwiatkowski. I appreciate, Wes, the comment about this is a guidance and there are no legal requirements or anything, but this is also a very important document, and actually to spend this amount of time and effort, which is very much appreciated, not to mention there was some money involved, to just create something that is sort of a nice to have, I think is sort of an underestimation of what it should be. Now, I think that this document has a lot of good ideas. It's probably, to me, 85 to 90% of the way there. What I'd like to understand in terms of the formal process, is it possible for us, a working group of the commissioners and some of this committee, to get together and go through, in particular, the policies and recommendations to make sure that it is really, everybody's on the same page. And I would say you have to do it in a public meeting anyway and to have public comment. But in the practice that is typically followed, is there anything that says that we could not have a working group meeting to discuss this before it's finalized and sent to, is it DCM, that then makes sure that it follows all of the requirements?
There's nothing that would prohibit that. That is certainly an acceptable option, should the town proceed in that fashion.
Okay. I do have like 5 pages of comments, but I'm not going to sit and give 5 pages. And a lot of it does have to do with fine tuning things, but again, this is not the forum to go item by item with 5 pages of comments. But if there is a site that we're supposed to put our public comments, I'm more than happy to type them up and provide them.
Anyone else? Joe, I think you had your hand up.
Joe Butler. I felt a little awkward, Pat, sitting here with the open meeting rules that we have, and I just want to say, as a commissioner, I just want to follow the open meeting rules. And I know I've been told before that once you have the number of commissioners that we have here, we have to be careful about what we recommend. And I look forward to discussing this in our meeting. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Mike Sullivan. I would just like to make sure that I understand this because I've sat on the planning and zoning board. I'm a current commissioner. And there's been issues that are brought up about parking and about the limiting of sizes of houses. And we've been told on a number of occasions that those decisions have to kind of follow the current land use plan, that we shouldn't be doing things that are opposite. What you just said was if we put a goal in there today and we decide that we don't want to follow that goal tomorrow, that we could do that. So do we have to follow the current land use plan when we decide to make changes, or do we not, is my question.
Every jurisdiction handles that differently in terms of the way they view the land use plan as setting policy. And so, as a general rule of thumb, yes, I always recommend that it is the sort of guidance document for the town moving forward for land use decisions. But there is no law, there is no rule that says that you can stray from that. For example, state statutes explicitly say that you need to have a consistency statement when you modify your zoning regulations. But one of those can say that it's not consistent, and you can still make the change. So, because, of course, the reason being that the town can't possibly foresee all of the particular requests that could ever come before it. There may be something that makes perfect sense, but it is in conflict with the land use plan.
I'm still confused.
Well, the board, I've done several presentations before the board, and I've told you that whether it's consistent or inconsistent with the land use plan, and we've also had, I think, maybe 1 or 2 consistency statements from this board that went to the Board of Commissioners. I think one that said it was not consistent and one that said it was consistent with the current land use plan. So we've been exercising exactly what he says since I've been here. We let you know whether it's consistent or not consistent, and we also tell you that it's a comprehensive plan and it's a guide. So that's not been a,
No.
yeah.
So, but I mean, there's a to me, there's a difference between if you have a goal, you can just change it when you want to and you don't have to follow it, rather than saying, you should really think very hard about what your goals are because you want to be consistent with your planning into the future. And I guess
The latter is the path that you should follow, but there's nothing gonna stop you proceed in this fashion, my hope is that, one, the planning and zoning board will find that and include that in any analysis. Tim will obviously have that. Once it gets to the elected officials will have to weigh, we have this guidance that says we shouldn't do this, but at the same time, this is in the public interest, X, Y, Z, and as elected officials, you all have to make the decision as to which path you should go.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Then we'll close the public hearing portion of the engagement session. Tim, I'm going to call on you to explain where we're going to go from here then.
Well, it was at the committee, if you remember correctly, we discussed having more than one public hearing. And the way we were going to handle this is we would have the public hearing today. The planning board would then vote as to whether or not they wanted to go forward with this copy. And if they were, then we would have another public hearing before we would proceed from there. The discussion is at that time whether or not we're going to take it to the Board of Commissioners or whether it's going to DCM for review first. And I think Wes had some ideas on that. Yeah, go ahead if you want to.
Yes. So I believe there's a request about, this board consideration of workshop. I don't know in terms of your staff how that's handled formally. Tim, if something's going to be workshopped, is that determined by the Board of Commissioners, the manager?
It's going to have to, right at this point in time right now, the committee, the committee is finished. They voted to send this to the planning board.
That's correct.
When the planning board votes on it one way or the other, then the committee will have to be re-engaged by the Board of Commissioners to go into a workshop to work on this
Okay.
before it goes, before the next public hearing, which is good that we've had to do, because it allows for that opportunity for the Board of Commissioners to re-engage the committee.
Okay.
If those who are on it want to serve again, to go back in and make changes if they feel like there's some that could be made.
Okay. So it sounds to me, typically the way this process would work, this board, say you recommend approval today, I would send it to Division of Coastal Management for them to just do their review, that they don't look at policies or anything. Technically, they don't look at policies anyways, but they just make sure it meets the state guidelines, and then they would get back to me in 90 days, 75 technically, but it's usually 90, and say, you're good to proceed with adoption. But given that there's sort of a request before you, this board can, I guess, choose to recommend approval of it, subject to whether or not there is additional workshopping between it going to Division of Coastal Management. And I suppose that would be an option. Sort of, I don't know how best to provide guidance to you guys, but that is potentially something that could occur.
Yeah, typically, what you don't want to do is mess around with the 7B guideline requirements. You would most places want to know that they're following those guidelines before they approve a final document. Where we're locked into now is that we have some interest in maybe going back and looking at it, and because we have decided to have that second public hearing, I think it gives us an opportunity to do that. It is outside the norm. It's not normally the way this is done. I've never done it like this before either, but it can be done. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from doing it this way.
So wasn't your original recommendation to do them simultaneously, so we're not like wasting the 75 days or 120 days it takes them to give the approval?
Yes, there is this can also, it be sent to Division of Coastal Management, then also sent to a workshop that's composed of commissioners. Once you all recommend it out of this board, it is under the purview of the commissioners. And so, say it goes to the commissioners choose to have a workshop, and they want to make a number of changes. I would then recommend that obviously, I would advise if there's any changes that are made that would conflict with the state planning guidelines. But I would then send it back to our local district planner and say, Mike, we have made some changes. I just want you to look over this again before we proceed with adoption to ensure that we are, in fact, good to go. And so that's how I would handle it.
Okay, well, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Is your contract perpetual?
Well, unfortunately, no. We're hired to produce a document and get it adopted. So, if there are substantial modifications to the scope, then, it often requires a budget adjustment on the project. But, depending on where this goes, we can have that discussion with the manager.
So I have a question. I'm a little confused because the Land Use Committee unanimously adopted it.
Yep.
And then it comes to the Planning and Zoning, who
That-
are all on the Land Use Committee.
That's correct.
So the assumption would be that they would unanimously adopt it. And then it goes to the commissioners. So at some point, the commissioners are going to have an opportunity to make changes and have this whole discussion that I think Pat is alluding to. And your recommendation was to send it to both at the same time,
Mhm.
with the assumption that you didn't think the commissioners are going to want to make any changes at all?
No.
Yeah, okay, so that's why I'm
No,
confused. It
sure.
seems like we were doing the process,
So it allows the commissioner to go ahead and receive it, start reviewing it.
Yes, exactly.
And, we'll at least by, in 90 days, we'll get a word back from Division of Coastal Management saying it does meet those requirements. Then, we'll keep track of any changes that are made. If they are substantial, or if I have concern that they potentially jeopardize the 7B planning guidelines, then I will send it back. Once the commissioners have finalized it, say, Mike, let's get another review here, and so we can proceed with our public hearing. So, it's potentially, it could delay the project for 75, 90 days. But in the interest of everyone's time, it doesn't make sense to not just go ahead and send it to the commissioners, right? Because there'd be 90 days, it would just sort of be a
Exactly.
black hole.
so I think we're on the path that we originally came up
Yeah.
with at our last meeting.
Yeah.
Because the commissioners are still going to have the opportunity to workshop it or talk about it or whatever, and make any changes that they see fit before it's finally adopted by them. They have to adopt it.
That's correct.
So I think what we originally agreed to, we're still on the path for that, or am I missing something?
You guys are, yes, I don't believe that there's any necessarily change from that.
Because Pat will still have her opportunity to make any
Yes,
comments or changes
Yes.
that the commissioners as a whole seem fit.
But I guess we could, this board,
yes,
decide,
recommend.
make the request that we want to have the workshop.
That's right, that's
That's
right.
right.
And then that could be sent formally
Board
to
of Commissioners.
the Board of Commissioners. That's
So
absolutely.
we could either do it, or the Board of Commissioners could
You-
decide they want to
You,
look at it.
you would have, whenever you do that, you're potentially affecting the contract. And so what this board would have to do is they would have to re-engage the commissioners. Y'all didn't create the committee, the
Right.
commissioners did. So you'll have to vote to re-engage, get the commissioners to re-engage the committee
Yep,
at that level.
Okay,
so it'd be a consideration, not
Right.
necessarily a mandate.
yeah, I understand. I did a request back to the commission.
That's right.
So the commissioners tasked the committee to review this and come up with in their judgment, what the best thing was. And then we would send it to them to have their own,
So,
Yes,
yeah, review of it, which is what they would do, which is what the original process is.
yes. Yes, and that's right. And I think the only reason why this was brought up, and I don't want to put words into any commissioner's mouth or anybody, is that, if there are changes or concerns, I think that the goal was to maybe make those on the front end before it ever gets sent to Division of Coastal Management.
Which is why we had all those open meetings to do that when we were going through this
I'm not,
for 8 months.
Advocating one way or another, I think I just wanted to clarify what.
As a commissioner, I was advised not to speak during the meeting.
Point of order. Let us recognize you because you need to be on the thing, but I'm not recognizing you yet. To address that, yes, we've been working on this for over a year, and Pat, you did participate in a lot of our meetings, and I did get called on the carpet for your participation. But I wanted you to have an opportunity to go ahead and address your issues during the meeting, because to me, that's more productive. So, I just want to put that out there. Now, what would you like to say?
I just wanted to say to Wes that, yes, Wes, my objective is always when dealing with authorities to try not to cause them rework, which is why typically I have preferred to do the things that you can before you send something forward. Because if there's even a 25% chance it would have to go back to them, you're doubling their effort. So that is the main part of my question about whether we can have a workshop before it gets sent, because it really reduces the likelihood of them having to look at it a second time.
All right, I don't even know where to go here.
I think that the two options are, one, and I think the Planning and Zoning Board is gonna have to make this determination. One, you recommend approval of the plan to the Board of Commissioners, or you recommend approval of the plan of the Board of Commissioners with consideration that the plan be further workshop prior to being sent to the Division of Coastal Management. Those would be the two options.
Yeah, do you want to add?
That is it. I mean, that's really the options before you, at this time, but that, yeah, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. The only thing, and Lord, I hate being in positions all the time, but as someone who sat there for a year while we did this, there was a committee. The board authorized me to form the committee. The committee was supposed to act like it did and then go before the planning board. That's the way I asked for it all to be done. And we put those committee members on there. And now that we know that there may be some things that need to be looked at, I would like to say this, that before that if you vote, that you might want to consider voting, having the committee be re-engaged instead of it going before the commissioners, okay, to review those changes, those input for those changes, if there's any out there, okay? Because if you send it forward for them to have a workshop, if they choose to have the workshop within themselves, which is perfectly okay, then you're now excluded from the end of the process that you took for 10 months. I used to do a little bit of pitching in my lifetime, and I used to be hated to be taken out at the end of the game when I was winning and somebody else put in, but it happened very often. You understand what I'm saying? And the committee's done a really good job on this. They've done a great job on this. And those are your two options, and one option sends it back and one option sends it forward. And that's it. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, so at this point, we basically concluded our engagement session, right? So,
Right. Close.
we need to motion to adjourn, close it.
That's right.
Yeah,
So
okay.
if somebody would like to make a motion.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The public engagement session is now closed. Okay, so now we're gonna move on.
Bang your gavel.
Yep, I will. Okay, thank you all for attending. We're now gonna move into our planning and zoning meeting. So I'll start with our roll call. Vicky here, Mark?
Here.
Tracy?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Greg? Not here. Pete?
Here.
and Woody.
Here.
Okay, Pete, you would be our alternate this meeting because Woody was in March.
That's right.
Okay, next on the agenda is public comment on agenda items. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment? Please come forward.
Do you have a sheet of the agenda items?
A copy of the agenda?
You can probably just read it, because there's only. I don't have one either, but that's okay.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry I don't have a copy, but does this hearing have to do with rezoning commercial?
No, it does not.
That's not on the
Here's a
agenda.
copy of, you can have this copy of the agenda, my copy.
Thank you.
I make mine on a different piece. The only item that's on this agenda, I mean, besides our regular minutes and that kind of thing, is the land use plan, and that's it.
Land use plan, thank you.
Okay, so were there any other public comments? Okay. Approval of the minutes. We had minutes of the March 26, 2019 regular meeting. Were there any changes, corrections, Woody?
Yeah, and I apologize, I don't have the paper copy of
Okay.
the minutes. We noted in the front page that Pete was absent from the meeting, but then further on in the minutes, we commented on Pete's comments.
So on the, what you're talking about is at the top where she's
Yes.
listing.
Yeah, I think you came in late that last meeting.
Got that? Are there any other changes, corrections? Is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The minutes stand approved as amended. Okay, now we are back to the land use plan. So you just heard from Tim our options going forward.
So I feel like if we don't, we have to send it to the commissioners anyway. We did our best. We have in there everything that we all on the committee thought was right and correct. We all approved it unanimously. So I feel like if we get together as a committee, look at those issues, we already looked at all those issues, we hashed them out, we put in there what we felt was the right thing. And if we send it the same way back to the commissioners, they're gonna hash it out for that, because they don't agree with what we've put in there. So just let them hash it out. I feel like we should approve it, let it go to them, and let them discuss it in their, so that they can have their say to the other commissioners when they vote on it, what we have in there. That's my opinion. We all approved it. We think it's right. We did our best. It's a compromise on a lot of issues. It's not 100% what I'd like to see in there or any of us that were on the committee. But I feel like we approved it and we feel like it's the right thing and that they can have their turn at it when it goes to commissioners for review.
I guess the question is, do we as the committee, as Tim was talking and Wes was talking, do we as the committee, would we like to hear what the input is and have some option to opine on it as the land use plan committee before the commissioners vote? Or are you willing to say whatever they come up with, we've done it, so whatever they can do, it's fine? I mean,
Yes.
Personally, I'd like to hear what the input is. If we missed the boat on something as a committee, I'd like to hear a different opinion.
I'm sure it's all the issues that we've already hashed out. Remember Wes kept saying, wait, we talked about that, wait, we talked about that, wait, we talked about. It's the same things that we hashed over and over again
Well,
and came to a
She has-
conclusion, compromise of what we felt was the right
the
thing.
purpose of the public hearing was to get input and comments. We got one person,
Yes,
besides the fact that she's commissioner, she's also a resident. We got one person who says they got 5 pages of notes. How do we know that she has the same issues we do.
So I'm saying that one person opinion, we had 10 people on our committee, and we all agreed to what we have in there is the right thing. So are we gonna change what we thought was right for what one person's dissenting opinion is? That's all I'm
I think
saying.
it's worth hearing. I mean, as Commissioner Sullivan said, this is a very important document.
Yes, I agree.
Personally, as much time as I have put into it over the last year and a half or so, I mean, I'd like to see, did we miss the boat? Was there something that we ought to go back and reconsider? Because unfortunately, you know, some of those meetings you get into, like you said, we compromise and do a little group think from time to time. I'd like to hear, and I'd like to get this project finished myself as opposed to just tossing it over the fence and saying, okay, y'all decide. I mean, I just like keep my ownership in it, but I'll support whatever the committee wants to do, but I'd like to keep some ownership into it until we're finalized.
But you don't have ownership in it, because in the end, it's going to the commissioners for
I
them to
understand, but I-
decide every single thing anyway. So
When I say
you're
owner-
not gonna own it.
When I say ownership,
are.
I mean, I agree, the town owns it, but when I say ownership, I'm talking about the fact of the time I've put into it, the time everybody else has put
I
into
agree.
it. If we're gonna say this is our document, I'd like to hear from everybody possible, and that's what this public hearing was about, was to hear from people about it. So if we got somebody that's got 5 pages of notes, I'd like to hear what they got to say before I say, okay, this is the document going to the Board of Commissioners.
I kind of feel like that ship sailed 8 months ago. That's
Look,
my
you're-
thing, like,
Yeah,
you know,
you're
it's the
entitled to-
11th hour, and
Yeah.
we've already decided that we feel it's the best compromise we could make, but that's my opinion,
The
so.
other
Well,
issue
you're entitled to your
here
opinion.
is, even if we reengage the committee and address those concerns, that would not preclude another third party to come in with another 5-page of notes, that, and my suspicion is a lot of those notes were issues that we had internal
Exactly.
conflict on. I mean, you know, not everything was 100% consensus. This was
Exactly.
as you indicated,
That's
a
right.
compromise document. I guess, you know, if we're looking, you know, if you're looking for that, I'd almost like that to happen in a single process and not a succeeding period of processes. And there will be one more public hearing of this
Exactly.
document. And my guess is more people will have had a chance to have read the document by that point in time, once this is published in its current, and this is still just draft form, because it's not adopted.
Correct.
And I'm almost, I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm almost leaning towards, let's get this thing out there and let's collect input from all the community, give the whole community a chance to input. And if that raises enough concern to reengage the whole committee again,
So
So
then
you're-
who would they give the input to?
Yeah.
Tim, correct me or Rhonda, if you're correct me if I'm wrong, we'll try to set up an email link below the draft plan and let folks
Make
provide
comments.
written comments.
We had a contract with Wes, and we had a ton of public input in this thing in the beginning. I know, because the money that sent to advertising came out of my budget. So I understand, but we're having a public hearing now. Folks that are interested have come. We can do that, but you know, it sounds like a redundancy of what we originally did. We had a lot of people here to start off with, and y'all all know I've been an advocate for the public knowing since the beginning because of one of my mishaps. So I'm just, other than that, we can do exactly what Wes just said, but we also need to consider that we had a lot of pages of public input, a lot, through that survey. There was a lot of information that came in. And we used that. That was used, or the committee used it. We didn't. The committee did. Use that information.
Just to comment on your thing, Woody, my understanding of this meeting was information sharing to the public and soliciting comments and any clarifying questions. It wasn't necessarily for input at this point of the process. That's what I thought it was for. That's what we were doing. We were sharing information to the public and clarifying questions, not input at this stage of the game when we've already
My
approved it.
assumption is Pat has questions.
I
You
don't
don't
think
think
she
so?
has questions. I think she doesn't like some of the things that are in the land use plan.
Well, you know,
Yes, I think we
We're
should.
waiting,
we
We're
have
waiting
an
on-
argument's what we're in.
Well, no,
we're
I-
just waiting on a motion.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
So if I motion to approve the plan as is and move it forward in the process.
I second.
okay, now is there any discussion on that? Explain exactly what process you're looking at.
Process where it goes, as Wes explained it to us, it goes to the Division of Coastal Management for approval of
The technical aspects.
technical aspects, and then it moves forward with an additional public meeting before the commissioners, and then the commissioners would have an opportunity to review it simultaneously.
And I had a question there. So once the commissioners review it, they can change it
Yep,
the way they
absolutely.
see fit. So it would be kind of redundant for them to bring the stuff forward to reassign the committee, bring the stuff forward to us, and then go through this process, and it goes back to them, and they're gonna do what they wanna do anyway.
Exactly.
So, you know, just to speed things along, let's skip through that, and like what Tracy says, is just, let's take it down the road, and then when the commissioners get it, they're gonna do what they want anyway, so, and
Well-
we've done our job.
And I
Exactly.
don't disagree with what you're saying. That's the expedient way of doing it. And this document, I mean, I hate to have a document that's just for bureaucracy, you know, I mean, you really like to think about this document as something that's the basis of where the town's trying to go,
Right.
all right? So if we have somebody that's got obviously a vested interest and that are on the Board of Commissioners, if they have questions, they have some input, going back again to what Tim said, they get taken out at the 8th inning, we throw it over the fence, the Board of Commissioners, they get to decide by themselves what they wanna do.
Well,
I'd
with
like
the
to at
link-
least hear the input to say, I hear you, I still think we are where we are, and like I said, we'd have that workshop, get that input, it
Well,
wouldn't take that
they're
long.
gonna have the opportunity when she, through the link in the website.
No, he's saying.
You're gonna have that opportunity,
Well,
Woody,
that's-
because they're gonna have that discussion in a public forum, and you can stand up at their Tuesday meeting and say what you think when they go through what the changes are that they wanna have. They're gonna do it in a public forum.
I think there's one other aspect here, and maybe it's not the most significant, but I sense that any reconvening of committee and stuff is probably an additional element to the existing contract we have, and so we're dealing with an area that we, quite frankly, aren't authorized to deal with an extension of budget. That probably belongs in the hands of.
Yeah, man, all we could do is ask the commissioners to reengage the committee. Yeah.
But
And
that's
they
gonna
don't-
happen anyway when this issue is dealt in their
Let's-
lap.
It's going to vote. I mean,
Okay.
once again, I prefer the other option, as you can tell. But if y'all think it needs to just go on to the commissioners, that's fine. I mean, we're all entitled to our opinion.
Is there any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor of Tracy's motion to go ahead and send it directly to the BOC, say aye.
Aye.
No,
You
He's not
can't vote
voting.
anyway.
sorry. I forgot I was alternate.
Are there any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. We'll be sending the land use plan directly to the commissioners. Okay. Moving on, comments. I had a couple of comments that are housekeeping issues. We need to do the swearing in of our alternates and election of a chair and vice chair, secretary, all that. We're gonna do that next month because this meeting, we've gotta be out of here quickly because there's another meeting coming up. We need to review the upcoming meeting schedule. October looks like it will be fine. It should be okay. November 26th and December 24th would be our November and December meetings. So next month, we need to review those. If you could all please check your calendars. And I also wanted to remind you that we have a couple of issues that are still pending. We have the larger houses issue, which is pending the attorney review, and the commercial zoning is still out there. And Tim, you are revising that, and we're bringing it back at some other time.
I let it die.
Okay.
There didn't appear to be any interest in the commissioners in having it come back, so that was my screw up, yeah, so, yeah, it's dead. far as I know.
Regarding the meetings, Vicki,
Yes.
just for clarification, because originally the planning and zoning meetings were at 4 o'clock and we moved them up to 2. What time are our meetings
2.
from now on?
I think we agreed that we wanted to do 2 because
Forever.
it was better for the staff.
Okay, just one,
And now that we're no longer doing land use, we would not be moving our regular monthly meeting to the second week. We would fall back to the
Right.
4th week.
That's right.
So can you just say when, tell me October again?
22nd.
Thank you.
22nd.
2 PM.
Okay, were there any other comments from you guys? Are there any comments from the public? No? Okay, then we would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great, I'll see you.